Hello everyone, welcome to the NFL Week 4 edition of the Player Prop Countdown, where I rank my 10 favorite player props for this week's NFL action. Before I get into it, just a quick reminder, please subscribe to the Bacon Bets podcast on YouTube, like this video, leave a comment with your favorite player prop for this weekend, and if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast somewhere, rate and review it if you can. I got 10 player props for this week. If you're looking for the road to 272 bets where I give out my best sider total for every single NFL game, that episode gets released on Tuesday morning. So that is already out for week 4. You can go back and listen to that either wherever you listen to your podcast or right here on the Bacon Bets podcast YouTube channel. Another 5-5 week last week with my player props. If nothing else, I've been consistent, at least with my player props. I went 5-5 in week 1, 5-4-1 in week 2, and then 5-5 again in week 3. So I've lost a tiny bit week 1 and 3, and I won a tiny bit in week 2. So far, season to date with the player props, I'm 15-4-1 for minus 0.83 units. Enough with these 5-5 weeks. Let's have a 6-4, hell, maybe even a 7-3 week this time around. Now, I do rank them every single week. I will say I am 2-1 with my number 1 ranked player props, and the one that I lost, not totally my fault. It was a Cooper Kupp over on his receptions, and Cooper Kupp got hurt halfway through the game. And then had to leave. He had 4 receptions and got hurt. That was in week 2. So last week, Jared Goff over 1.5 pass touchdowns did cash. I think one of the 2 pass touchdowns was a hook and ladder, which I didn't know at the time if a hook and ladder counts as a pass reception, or a passing touchdown. If you throw a touchdown to a guy and then he laterals it to someone else, is that a passing touchdown? Apparently it is. Let me double check this game recap here against the Cardinals, but apparently it is. Because we have now waited several days. All those bets have cashed. So at this point, I assume it is. Yeah, it counts as a Jahmyr Gibbs. So I believe Jared Goff threw to Amon-Ra St. Brown. He then lateraled it to Jahmyr Gibbs, and it goes down as a 20-yard pass from Jared Goff to Jahmyr Gibbs. Interesting. Jared Goff, my number 1 ranked player prop last week, did cash. My number 2 player prop also cashed, Alvin Kamara over 64.5 rush yards. So my top 2 did cash. Gabe Davis did not. Number 3, Kyle Pitts, number 4, did not. Number 5 didn't either. So top 2 hit last week. Let's focus on that. But this is the player prop countdown. This version of the show, I take no breaks. I do very little editing. The editing and the fancy episode is the road to 272. So we're just going to dive right into it. No intro or anything like that. I have my 10 player props locked in for week 4. Let's get a 6th win this week. Let's go 6-4. Let's go 7-3. Hell, maybe we'll even go 8-2. Who knows? Let's get crazy. Number 10 favorite player prop for week 4 of the NFL season. It is an under on a rushing total. It is James Cook of the Buffalo Bills going up against the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday Night Football, which is going to be a hell of a game. But I'm going to take James Cook under 52.5 rush yards at minus 117. The Baltimore Ravens ranked first in the NFL through the first 3 games in opponent yards per carry, giving up just 2.8 yards per rush. I do have some concern about the Ravens defense, but that concern comes in the secondary. They haven't been great in terms of defending the pass, but they've been elite at stopping the run through the first 3 games this season. And it is also worth noting Cook has only had 11 carries in each of his last 2 games. He's played very well this season, but the amount of carries is a little bit limited. Now, maybe that's because they've gotten off to such big leads the past 2 games, so maybe they've taken him out. But for him to go over 52.5 rushing yards, if he does kind of hit, an 11, 12, 13 carry game, he's going to have to average over 5 yards a carry. And I just don't know if I necessarily see that happening against this Ravens defense. And I believe, if you listen to the road to 272 this week, that the Ravens will win this game. If the Ravens do win this game, that means they're going to be leading probably, at least for a portion. And I could see that turning into causing the Bills to have to throw the ball a little bit more than run the ball. So James Cook under 52.5 rush yards at minus 117 is my number 10 ranked player prop for this week. Moving on, we're going to a guy who I've bet against twice this season. And now we're flipping it around and we are going to bet in on him. I personally kind of treat especially player props like the stock market. You got to sell high, buy low. I felt like the first 2 weeks when I bet against this guy, I felt like I was selling high. And now I think is the perfect time to buy low on him. And if you haven't guessed already, I'm speaking of the number 1 overall pick from this year's draft, Caleb Williams from the Chicago Bears. I'm taking the over on his pass yards total this week of 223.5. He and the Bears are taking on the LA Rams. If you remember week 1, I took the under on his passing yards total is at like 253. And then week 2, I think it was still like 227. But it's not just necessarily, I think he's going to have, all of a sudden play that much better, but he gets to play against a Rams team that is giving up, listen carefully while I say this, 9.4 yards per pass attempt. The Rams secondary absolutely stinks. That is the most yards per pass attempt this season by 1.2 yards. They're also giving up 248.7 pass yards per game, which is 25 yards more than his set total for Sunday. And Caleb Williams threw the ball last week against the Colts 52 times, 37 times in the game before that. I think the Bears are learning that they can't run the ball because they can't. Let me check to see rushing yards per attempt here, but second worst rush yards per attempt in the NFL, only 3 yards per carry. So they are now relying on the pass. We've seen that the past 2 weeks. They're asking Caleb Williams to throw the ball a ton. Add that in with the fact that he gets to face one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL so far in the Rams, and I think we're going to have a Caleb Williams to go over this total. I mean, he threw for like 350 yards last week because he threw the ball so much. So Caleb Williams over 223.5 pass yards against the Rams. We're going to go to the Eagles game. The Eagles are taking on the Bucks. I don't know why I blanked on that. I had to look at my notes for a second. I'm going to go Saquon Barkley to continue his hot start to the season. I just talked about how, I'm treating player props a little bit like buy low, sell high. I don't think it's ready to sell on Saquon yet. I think you can still invest in Saquon a little bit, and I still think you can turn a little bit of a profit. Because Saquon Barkley has, to be fair, gone way over his rushing yards total in all 3 games so far this season, so that may make you want to zig instead of zag here and take the under. But Saquon and the Eagles are taking on a Bucs defense who has not been able to stop the run this season. The Buccaneers ranked 26th in opponent yards per carry, giving up 4.9 yards per rush. And Saquon is just having an unbelievable season. There's a reason why he is the betting favorite to win Offensive Player of the Year. He's averaging 5.6 yards per rush. And his lowest rushing game so far this season was against my Falcons when he still got 95 yards, 18 yards more than his set total for this week. So I think the Eagles lean on the run game a little bit as well with their kind of receiving core still banged up. I will take Saquon Barkley over 77.5 rush yards. I think he has another monster game, and that's at minus 115 is the juice on that. For my number 7 ranked player prop of the week, we're going to the toilet bowl of the week, which is the 0-3 Bengals taking on the Carolina Panthers. Carolina Panthers with a red rifle at quarterback. He will be facing his former team. It feels like 2 decades. It feels like 20 years ago when Andy Dalton was like the starter for the Bengals, doesn't it? Andy Dalton throwing to AJ Green. Doesn't that feel like 20 years ago? It does. I guess that was probably early 2010s, I suppose. But I'm going to bet on the Red Rifle going up against his former team. And how I'm going to bet on Andy Dalton of the Panthers going up against his former team, the Bengals, is I'm going to take over 21.5 completions. And this is a plus money play here, my friends. Over 21.5 completions at plus 105 odds. The Bengals are 30th in the NFL in opponent completion percentage. Teams are completing 75% of their passes against this Bengals team. Listen, I talked preseason, I talked before week 1, I talked before week 2, I talked before week 3, and I talked before again this week, that the Bengals secondary stinks. They gave up the most yards per pass attempt last season. This is a team that did get a little bit better by bringing back Von Bell. Geno Stone, I think, is with them now. But still, we saw Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels, a rookie quarterback playing in his third NFL game ever, torched them the other night. And on top of all that, Andy Dalton threw the ball 37 times last week against the Raiders in his first start, and it worked. They won. They won the game. They beat the Raiders. So the Panthers coaching staff is probably like, listen, we made Andy Dalton throw the ball 37 times. He threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Let's go and sling it again and see what happens. So I think they're going to make Andy Dalton throw the ball a ton again. I think he's going to have success again against this Bengals secondary, and I think he can get to 22 completions. I think he had 20. How many completions did he have last week? He had more than that, 25, 26 completions last week, and that was with, in a game that was relatively a blowout, so they were able to kind of get off the past game. 26 completions last week. We only need 22 this week, and they're probably going to throw the ball just as much, if not more, against a secondary that's just as bad, if not worse. I will take Andy Dalton at plus money, plus 105, over 21.5 completions. I said that I am going to do one kind of a dark horse touchdown score every week this season. I've not hit one yet. I really like Justice Hill last week, but he did not get in the end zone. I am still going to do it, and the one I'm targeting this time is in the Colts-Steelers game. Actually, my next 2 picks are in the Colts-Steelers game. I did change up the games I'm betting on. I only have one game with 2 picks, and that game is the Colts-Steelers. My first of 2 picks is Pat Freiermuth, the Steelers tight end, to score a touchdown. It is 4-1 at Caesars Sportsbook. That is the best sportsbook regulated in New York. The best odds of the New York regulated sportsbook for Freiermuth to score a touchdown is at Caesars at 4-1. The other place is around plus 320. So of course I will take it at 4-1. George Pickens is still the number 1 option in Pittsburgh. We all know that. But it's actually Pat Freiermuth who has been the second option in the passing game. He's second on the team in both targets with 13 and receptions with 12. He has not scored a touchdown so far this season, but I expect him to score sooner rather than later. The targets are there, the yards are there. Pat Freiermuth will be scoring sooner rather than later at 4-1. I think that's a great bet. Also, the Steelers are playing up against the Colts. I did not look to see how all of the tight ends did against the Colts this season, but Cole Kmet last week had 10 catches for 97 yards and a touchdown. So the Colts got torched by the opposing tight end last week. Who'd the Colts play before that? Colts played the Packers before that. Packers didn't really throw the ball. No real sense looking at that. Who'd they play in week 1? Colts play the Texans in week 1. That's who? Dalton Schultz? Did Dalton Schultz have a big game against him? No, 3 catches for the 16 yards. Well, last week the tight end torched him. Maybe that'll carry on into this week. Or maybe it's just the fact Caleb Williams threw for 8 billion yards. Pat Freiermuth, anytime touchdown, 4-1. Like I said, we're going to stay in this game. We're going to take Jonathan Taylor. Might be blasphemy to say this. Jonathan Taylor under 73.5 rush yards. We're going to take the under on his rush yards, 73.5 minus 115. The Steelers are second in the NFL in opponent yards per carry, keeping teams to 3.5 yards per rush. Third in opponent total rushing yards per game. Teams are only getting 71.3 total rushing yards per game against them. And I think Jonathan Taylor might be a little overvalued after 2 back-to-back good games against the Packers and Bears, 2 teams that don't necessarily have good run defenses. Sell high to keep the stock market analogies going. I think we're going to go in a little bit of a sell high spot here on Jonathan Taylor of the Colts and take the under on his rushing yards of 73.5. I got to play for Thursday Night Football, so I guess you're only going to be able to play this one if you listen to this the day that it's released, which is Thursday. If you're listening to this Friday, Saturday, or Sunday morning, you missed it. You may as well tune in to the Player Prop Countdown Thursday morning to make sure you get any props for that night. It is one that I played last week, and it hit with ease, and I don't see any reason why we don't go back to it. It is Ezekiel Elliott of the Dallas Cowboys, under 27.5 rushing yards. Zeke in week 1 for the Cowboys played in 51% of snaps. In week 2, he played in 40% of snaps. I saw the downturn in his snap percentage, so I took the under in his rushing yards total last week, and then last week he was on the field for only 19% of snaps. He ran the ball just 3 times for 6 yards. The under on his rushing total, which I think was in the 30s last week, was one of the easiest player props we've hit all season. I'm shocked that they're even posting Zeke player props at this point. Like, his rushing yards should be in low 20s, if not high teens, because he's not playing. He played 19% of snaps last week. Now, maybe that had to do with the fact that they were down early, so they had to go to a little bit more of a pass-first offense. But he's the clear number 2 guy, if not number 3 guy in Dallas. He's not getting the carries. He's not getting the snaps. And when he does get the carries, he's averaging 3.26 yards per carry. We can fade Zeke until they take his rushing yards off the board or until they lower them to a point where there's no longer value. But there's a ton of value. By the way, overall, the Cowboys run the ball the second lowest rate in the NFL. They run the ball alone at 31.63% of plays. We're going to keep rolling with this one. Zeke under 27.5 rushing yards. My number 3 favorite player prop this week, it is another plus money one. This is the Broncos and the Jets. It is Garrett Wilson of the Jets, their number 1 receiver, to go under 4.5 receptions at plus 110. The Denver Broncos have one of the best secondaries in the NFL so far this season. They currently rank 3rd in the NFL in opponent yards per pass attempt, 5.1. But most importantly, they have done a good job, specifically with Patrick Surtain, of shutting down their opponent's number 1 option. So if you look through the first 3 weeks, DK Metcalf was the top option for the Seahawks in their week 1 game. He had 3 catches for 29 yards. George Pickens was the top option for the Steelers against the Broncos in week 2. George Pickens had 2 catches for 29 yards, and then Mike Evans against the Broncos last week had 2 catches for 17 yards. So, excuse me, just to recap, the number 1 receiver for each team so far against the Denver Broncos has 3 catches, 29 yards, 2 catches, 29 yards, 2 catches, 17 yards. So we are getting plus money, plus 110 for Garrett Wilson, the top option for the Jets, to get fewer than 4.5. He can get 4, which would beat Metcalf, which would beat Pickens, which would beat Evans, and we're still cashing this at plus 110. I rank this as my number 3 player prop. As I'm talking myself through it, it might be my favorite. Can I switch? Is it too late? I don't think I like it as much as my number 1, but I might like it better than my number 2. It's too late. It's too late. I said it as my number 3. It's my number 3. But just so you know, I really do like that play, especially at plus money. Number 2, we're going to Monday night for this one. This is the Monday night game between the Seahawks and the Lions. I'm going to go Jared Goff. Oh, I do like this one. Yeah, this one's rightfully number 2. Jared Goff under 233.5 pass yards, a minus 115. Jared Goff over his passing touchdowns last week was my number 1 play. My number 2 play is now fading Jared Goff to go under 233.5 pass yards. Number 1, the Seahawks have allowed the fewest yards per pass attempt this season in the NFL. They are allowing just 3.9 yards per pass attempt. They're also allowing the fewest total passing yards per game, 132.3, which is over 100 yards less than Jared Goff's total. Now, to be fair, to be transparent, the Seahawks have played the Patriots, the Broncos, and who'd they play last week? Who'd the Seahawks play last week? Patriots, when they went to overtime, they beat the Broncos. The Seahawks just beat... Why am I blanking on this? Who did the Seahawks just beat? Seahawks just beat the Dolphins with Skylar Thompson. So they have played probably to be fair, they were probably the 3 worst passing attacks in the NFL right now. The Patriots, the Broncos, and the Tua-less Dolphins. But still, hey, good defenses dominate, bad offenses when they have a good matchup, and that's what the Seahawks have done. And yeah, Jared Goff can still play better than all 3 quarterbacks have played so far against the Seahawks. He just can't throw for 234 yards, which is a pretty big ask, especially due to how much the Lions have run the football. The Lions got back to the run game last week. They ran the ball 63.24% of plays last week. They ran the ball a ton in week 1 against the Rams. They won. They got away from that in week 2 against the Buccaneers. They then threw the ball a lot. It did not work. They lost. They decided to go back to running the football in week 3. It worked. They won. So they're probably going to continue to run the ball at a pretty high clip this week as well, which is also going to hurt Jared Goff's passing yards total. So I'll take the under 233.5 pass yards for Jared Goff. And my number one player prop for week 4 of the 2024 NFL season, we're going to what sneakily might be the most exciting game of the week, the Commanders and the Cardinals. And I'm going to go Kyler Murray over 230.5 pass yards at -114. The Commanders' secondary absolutely stinks. They give up 8 yards per pass attempt. They give up 255.7 total passing yards per game. Yes, they were able to beat the Cincinnati Bengals on Monday night, but Joe Burrow threw for like 320 yards or something. Only like 4 incompletions. Joe Burrow torched them. Baker Mayfield torched them. Daniel Jones somehow torched them. Kyler Murray, his passing yards total for this week should be significantly higher than 230.5 passing yards. He's averaging in his career 239.4 passing yards. So even if he just hits his career average for passing yards in a game, he'll go over this by 10 yards almost. This is a no-brainer. Also, the Cardinals' defense sucks. This could be an offensive shootout. This could be a game where 65 points are scored. Kyler Murray, I think, is going to soar over this total against the Commanders' defense of 230.5 passing yards. That is my number one player prop for this week. Just to recap, from 10 to 1. Number 10 is James Cook under 52.5 rush yards. Number 9 is Caleb Williams over 223.5 pass yards. Number 8 is Saquon Barkley over 77.5 rush yards. Number 7 is Andy Dalton over 21.5 completions. Number 6 is Pat Freiermuth anytime touchdown. Number 5 is Jonathan Taylor under 73.5 rush yards. Number 4 is Zeke under 27.5 rush yards. Number 3 is Garrett Wilson under 4.5 receptions. Number 2 is Jared Goff under 233.5 pass yards. And my favorite player prop for week 4, Kyler Murray over 230.5 pass yards. As I always do, I'll finish up with my DFS lineup. I only made one this week, unfortunately. And the one that I made includes Monday's games. But I don't really think you need me to do 2 different lineups because you know the players that I like. All of the players in this lineup that also play on Sunday, if I made a Sunday-only lineup, it would be included in my Sunday lineup. And I think I only have one player who plays on Monday. You can just switch in someone else at a similar price. So let's go through it. For those of you listening, it might be a little bit better to watch this section on YouTube so you can physically see my lineup. But hey, if my number one player prop of the week is Kyler Murray to go over his passing yards total, I'm obviously going to make Kyler Murray my quarterback for DFS. As you can probably tell, I mean, a lot of these players are players that I just made picks for. Kyler Murray, my quarterback. Saquon Barkley, I'm going expensive on him as my running back. I took the over on his rush yards for the reasons I stated earlier. That makes a lot of sense. There was a player I couldn't bet on his rushing yards total because as of tonight, his odds weren't available. His rushing yards total was not available at any sports book. So I do want to mention him in case you're listening to this a little bit later on in the week and his rushing yards are available. I would keep an eye on Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the second string running back, because it's time that the Buccaneers switch to Bucky Irving over Rachaad White, because Rachaad White's, I think, averaging 2.2 yards per carry. Bucky Irving so far has been averaging like over 5 yards per carry. So they'd be stupid to continuing trying to run the ball with Rachaad White. I think they turn to Bucky Irving a little bit more starting this week. And if they do that, then you can get Bucky Irving at a very cheap price for DFS, and I don't know what his rushing yards total is going to be, but it's probably going to be a low total. So I'm investing heavily this week, buying low on Bucky Irving. DJ Moore, you know, I like Caleb Williams over on his passing yards total. That was another one of my favorite player props, but I could only take one quarterback in DFS. So since I already took Kyler Murray, how I'm going to try to take Caleb Williams is by taking his number one receiver in DJ Moore against the Rams. Speaking of the Rams, I also took Tutu Atwell with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp both out for the Rams. There was a question of who would be the top receiver for the Rams between Tyler Johnson, Tutu Atwell, Jordan Whittington, and it seems like the answer, at least through one game without Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, is Tutu Atwell. And it does make sense. He has the most experience in the Rams offense out of all those players, so especially in the first few games without Cooper and Puka, I think Tutu makes a lot of sense. He's a very cheap option this week for the Rams. Matt Stafford needs someone to throw to. Michael Wilson for the Cardinals, another cheap option. I'm doubling up on him with Kyler Murray. Very cheap option for a guy who got 8 receptions last week. He, in my opinion, is, I'm pretty sure, the clear number 2 receiver in Arizona outside of Marvin Harrison. So I'm going to hope for that connection to continue from last week into this week. My tight end's, of course, going to be Pat Freiermuth. If I like him to score, I'm going to like him as a cheap option at tight end. The only player on Monday Night Football that I like is DK Metcalf. Basically, all it was is I always fill in my flex player last, and I just fill out the rest of my lineup based on guys I like, and then I take basically one of the more expensive guys that I have left with my budget in my flex position. That happened to be DK Metcalf, and it does make a lot of sense. The Seahawks are going up against a Lions secondary, which is all not that good. And then the Chiefs defense. The Chiefs are playing the Chargers, who will have no Joe Alt, probably their other tackle. Well, I want to say Rashawn Slater. Is that right? I don't know if that's right. That's the name that popped up in my head. But I believe they're going to be without both their starting tackles and probably no Justin Herbert, which means Taylor Heineke quarterback. Taylor Heineke quarterback with backup tackles is a recipe for disaster for the Chargers. The Chiefs might get 82 sacks and 16 interceptions. So I will take the Chiefs defense as my defense. So Kyler Murray, Saquon Barkley, Bucky Irving, DJ Moore, Tutu Atwell, Michael Wilson, Pat Freiermuth, DK Metcalf, and Chiefs defense is my DFS lineup for this week. There you go. That has been the player prop countdown for NFL Week 4. Be sure to listen to and watch the Road to 272 bets for my best side and total bets for every game this week. Gamble or bless. Good luck with all your picks. I'll talk to you on Tuesday for the Week 5 edition of the Road to 272. Talk to you then.